Keeping safety front of mind is all about communication. Welcome to the Farm Safety Roundup, a podcast series focused on important conversations to help keep farmers, their families, and their workers safe. Farm Safety Roundup is brought to you by the agricultural team at Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. With today's timely topic, I'm your host, Sean Haney. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Farm Safety Roundup here on RealAgriculture.com. Today we're talking about machine entanglements. You know, agriculture is considered one of the most hazardous industries, and heavy machinery is the culprit in so many farm-related injuries and fatalities. But by their very nature, powerful machines used to handle large bales, plant or harvest crops they're dangerous to operate, let's be honest. And accidents can mean life-changing injuries like amputation or even worse. The reality is, in many cases, the root cause of these accidents is human error. And that means, to be honest, they're preventable in some form or fashion. Today we're talking about machine entanglements and prevention. Our guest is Mike Wilson. Mike is a senior health and safety consultant with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services and a machine and robotics specialist. Mike, it's great to chat with you.
Good afternoon, Sean. Good to chat with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very, very important topic here. This is one for sure. If you've been impacted or you know somebody that's been impacted, this is life-changing when it comes to dangerous things on the farm. You know, understanding how machine entanglements happen is really one of the keys for sure to prevention. So let's kind of start with that, the proactive side of it. Where do machine entanglements mostly occur on the farm?
Well, Sean, I got to tell you, with all the equipment you have on a farm, there's no shortage of entanglement hazards. Balers, headers on combines, augers, fans, soil mixers, planting machines, goes on and on. The one that we hear about the most is the PTOs, or the power takeoffs from a tractor. Very dangerous part. Why is it dangerous? Well, it turns at very high speed. It doesn't take much to get close to it. And then if it's loose clothing, whether it be a shoelace, a glove, what have you, boom, in you go. And Sean, I'll tell you, I had a colleague of mine a few years back was giving a safety talk to a group of farmers, and they were having this conversation about the PTO, and farmer stood up and said, you know what, I encourage the folks that work for me to step over that PTO just because it saves time. And before she could even comment, there was a second farmer that stood up and told a quick little story I'd just like to share with you. He had told anybody working on his farm, you stay away from the PTO. You give it at least a meter, don't even get close to it. And on this particular day, there was actually a breeze, and one of the workers around the PTO, there was a loose thread on his shirt. And by some miracle, he was actually holding on to the wagon. The wind blew this thread into the PTO, tore the shirt straight off his back. Now, like I said, a miracle the guy wasn't hurt. Still a lot of bruising, but could have been a lot worse. And I'll tell you, Sean, that was the end of that conversation pretty quick. PTO, hands down, one of the most dangerous things you'll see on the farm.
Okay, but a lot of machinery now is equipped with, you know, safety mechanisms or safety features to protect workers, isn't it? Like, why is this still a thing?
Well, you know what? A lot of machines do come with barriers, guards, shields to protect people from these hazards, and they are usually, they're bolted in place. They're on where they should be. But you know as well as I do, from time to time, you got to fix things. Those covers come off, and maybe they don't make it back on. Maybe the guard got broken because it got jammed in something. And if those barriers aren't in place, well, that's how people can get hurt. Now, in a perfect world, let's say the barrier's been there for years. Maybe it's rusted out or it's broken down the road, and people got used to having the guard in place. And if it gets left off or it is broken, now we are exposed to what's behind those barriers, those guards, be it drive belts, drive chains, what have you. So can you get a false sense of security? Yeah, there can be a lot of that. You can have some younger workers that might not even know there's a hazard behind that panel. Or, I hear a lot, some of the folks that have been around for a while insist, I know it's there. I'm quick enough or I'm good enough to get out of the way. So at the end of it, Sean, I got to tell you, the machine doesn't care. Like, if it's turning, if it's moving, if you get in the way, you're going to lose.
And I have to think, like, as you were talking there, the word insurance came to mind, right?
Mm,
Somebody removes a guard because, for whatever reason, any sort of justification, somebody gets hurt. That would be one of the very first things I think insurance company would be asking about is, why were these safety guards and voiding of insurance? Like, that just feels like a whole mess.
that's a long conversation. I mean, if I'm the one that's running the equipment, yeah, I have that responsibility. And I know you've got listeners all across the country. Basic responsibilities about making sure the equipment is safe. That's about routine maintenance. Hey, are those guards in place? If they are missing, how do we make sure they get back on before the equipment goes back into use? And you're right, Sean. At the end of the day, hey, whose equipment is it? And did you take the steps to make sure people were going to be safe? That not only about making sure the guards are in place, but have they been trained to use that equipment properly?
Yeah. Yeah, good points. Okay, so while we're talking about maintenance and guards, also important to emphasize the importance of lockout
Yeah,
because you really do not want a machine starting up while somebody is working on it.
absolutely, absolutely, Sean. And don't think of working around the equipment as just maintenance and repairs. You got to think of things like cleaning around the machinery or taking care of jams. Again, I had a colleague of mine um, mentioned a point where some of the headers on the combines they jam up from time to time, and some people won't even stop that while they're cleaning it out. Well, a lot of dangerous moving parts there for sure that'll make quick work of your fingers and your arm. But you're absolutely right. When you're working on those augers, those conveyors, go over, shut that system off. It might be an electrical breaker, it might even be an electrical plug. Unplug it, snap a lock on it, and put the key in your pocket. As long as that energy source, that electrical, is locked out and your lock is in place, that's your guarantee it's not going to start up while you're working on it. So, like you said, Sean, if your hands are going to be in there changing a belt, changing a sprocket, whatever the case might be, I want to be really sure it's not going to start up while I've got my hands in there. And that's what the lockout does for you. It's your guarantee it's not going to start up. When you're done, take the lock off, turn the power back on. Life's good.
And when we're doing assessments to know kind of what the hazards are, all we have farms across the country, all shapes and sizes, and no home yard, for example, is laid out the same. It's not like
Yeah.
it's all cookie cutter, right? There's a lot of differences. So, what are some of the things that farmers should do to take stock of the hazards that are on their farms?
You know what? The way I would approach it is take a look at it as if you've never seen any of it before, right? Look at those hazards. Right now, I use a pretty simple thing myself when I'm walking around is, does it move? Can I reach it? Would it hurt me? So you think about the combine, you think about augers, you think about conveyors. Is there movement? Yes. Do I have access to it? To your point earlier, if the guard's missing, I might have access. And if I got in there, would it be bad? And I use a little acronym like MAC, motion, access, consequence. That's how I go to look for those mechanical hazards like entanglement. And sometimes someone will say to me, "Oh, Mike, you know what? We know that's dangerous. No one's going to put their hand in there. Who's going to do that?" And boy, if I had a nickel for every time someone told me that, I'd be a rich man, that's for sure. But like I said, you've got to think of it as someone who's never seen the machinery. Okay. What would you warn them about first? Okay. Does it move? Can they reach it? If they did reach it, would it be bad? You need to know where those hazards are. Certainly make sure you've got the guards in place and develop those operating procedures, training programs. Hey, is this working the way it should? If it's not, let's stop, let's get it fixed. If you're not familiar with the equipment, ask for some instruction before you start to work on it. And as we said, if the equipment does need maintenance, that's when you're locking it out to protect yourself.
How do we make sure that familiarity doesn't bring complacency when we're talking about safety and using equipment that we're using on a regular basis?
Well, that's the price of safety, eternal vigilance, right? I think everyone does get complacent at some point, Sean. We don't see the forest for the trees, and we do see it a lot as someone spends his day doing safety. There's an assumption sometimes that hey, nothing's gone wrong in a very long time, and it probably never will. That's where you start to get into trouble. Now, quick little story. Working around the house a couple of years ago, I was drilling some holes for some concrete anchors. Old hammer mill, cold day, so I had some gloves on. Didn't even think about it. So like rotating drill, wearing gloves, And I got to tell you, to this day, I still see the whole thing in slow motion. Now, fortunately, the drill wasn't at full speed yet, but I can still see my hand wrapping around that drill. I should have had the side handle for the drill. I lost it years ago and didn't even give it a second thought. So a lot of times those hazards do fade into the background just as we go about getting our daily work done. You've got to respect the machine, and the day you don't, that's when something goes wrong. Like we said earlier, if the guard's in place, the risks should be lower, but they're never zero. If the machine can run, there's hazards there. Again, that's the price of safety. You've always got to be on the lookout for those hazards.
Okay, so to wrap up here, what can farmers do to prevent machine entanglements on the farm? What are those things they have to keep top of mind to make sure this doesn't happen to them or people they're working with?
Yeah, sure. A few years back, we had a very simple statement that really sticks with me. Stop, think, act. Whenever you're getting out ready to do the work out on the farm there, what could go wrong? What has changed? Is the weather changing? That's going to change conditions for sure. But when you need to think about the work you're doing, am I properly trained? Am I physically and mentally ready for the work? Hey, there's no timetable when you're working on the farm. You go until the job is done. So fatigue becomes a factor. Do you have the right equipment? Are those guards in place, like we said? Am I in a rush, or is my boss pushing me to get planting or harvesting done? Is the weather going to move? One thing I'm guilty of from time to time, if I'm working on something, the light's going to be bad. It's getting dark and I'm trying to fix this machine just to get the job done. So think about what you need to do. And before you act, make sure the equipment's safe. Do a walk around, a circle check. Again, do you have the right tools and equipment? Maintain the machinery, right? I know a lot of times maintenance falls by the wayside because you're trying to get the job done, but you got to maintain that machine. And ultimately, Sean, please don't take those shortcuts like stepping over the PTO. I know it saves time, but if somebody gets into that PTO, boy, I'll tell you what, it's going to be pretty bad. Train everybody on what those hazards are. And if they can't do the job safely, then stop the work, take the steps to do the work safe.
And Mike, whenever we make a decision, there's always things we're compromising or we're giving up, right? And so you just made me think of something. Would I rather save time or save a limb? Maybe the best way to look at it.
Well, that's pretty much it. And again, as I said earlier, a lot of people, I for example, PTO, I've stepped over it a bunch of times, nothing's happened. Okay, fine, you've been lucky. Can you guarantee the same luck moving forward? And you're right, with those hazards fading into the background, we get a little complacent. We forget that this machine was built for one purpose, to turn that implement or to move that, turn that auger, drill that post hole, whatever the case might be. We see people that have got their hair pulled into augers. I've seen bootlaces pulled into conveyors, and it's going to be bad. If you look at the stats, the injuries on farms, half are accommodated to machines, and they're going to be bad when they happen. It's not just, I'm going to go to the first aid kit and get a Band-Aid. It's, I need medical attention. And in a lot of cases, I'm not going to be the same when I come back from this. So before you start to think, oh, I'm going to save 10, 15, 20 seconds, what could go wrong? And let's take steps to do our best to avoid that. It's that stop, think, and act that's key.
Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us so much here. Important topic, and I really appreciate you being here on the Farm Safety Roundup.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. Have a great day.
Thanks to our friends at Workplace Safety and Prevention Services for helping to get all farmers safely home at day's end. For some really useful tips and tools, I encourage you to go to wsps.ca/farmsafety. With agricultural expertise to help keep farmers, their families, and their workers safe, Farm Safety Roundup is a podcast series produced by Real Agriculture with the team of ag specialists at Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. Go to the website wsps.ca/farmsafety. There you're going to find free health and safety resources, and you'll also be able to check this episode's show notes for information on the topics discussed. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time to talk all things farm safety right here on the Farm Safety Roundup.